Hi, everybody. Oh, we've got a story now, and it's called The Dirty Shepherdess. A shepherdess. What's a shepherdess? A person, a lady who looks after sheep. You've got a shepherd who's male and a shepherdess who's a female. So let's have a look at this. Right, don't forget, shout out at the end. Don't be fast forwarding because I know what you like. It's a story. I hope you've had a really good day. If you're watching this before bedtime, have a nice sleep and wake up nice and refreshed. If you're watching it in the day, well, that's a cool thing to do because there's nothing like a story in the day, is there? Anyway, The Dirty Shepherdess from this book, the Green Fairy book. Once upon a time, there lived a king who had two daughters and he loved them with all his heart. When they grew up, he was suddenly seized with a wish to know if they, on their part, truly loved him. So he made up his mind that he would give his kingdom to whichever best proved her devotion. So he called the elder princess and he said to her, "How much do you love me?" "As the apple of my eye," she answered. "Oh," exclaimed the king, kissing her tenderly as he spoke, "you are indeed a good daughter." Then he sent for the younger and he asked her how much she loved him. "I look upon you, my father, as I look upon salt in my food." But the king did not like her words, and he ordered her to quit the court and never to appear before him again. That poor princess went sadly up to her room and began to cry. But then she was reminded of her father's command, so she dried her eyes, she made a bundle of her jewels and put on her best dresses, and then she hurriedly left the castle where she'd been born. Wow. She walked straight along the road in front of her without knowing very well where she was going or what was to become of her, for it had never been shown, she'd never been shown how to work, and all she had learned consisted of a few household rules and receipts of dishes which her mother had taught her long ago. And as she was afraid that no housewife would want to engage a girl with such a pretty face, she determined to make herself as ugly as she could. So therefore, she took off a dress that she was wearing and put on some horrible old rags belonging to a beggar, all torn and covered with mud. And after that, she smeared mud all over her hands and face, and she shook her hair into a great tangle. Having just changed her appearance, she went about offering herself as a goose girl or a shepherdess. But the farmers' wives would have nothing to say about such a dirty maiden and sent her away with a morsel of bread for charity's sake. Oh dear. After walking for a great many days without being able to find any work, she came to a large farm where they were in want of a shepherdess, and they engaged her gladly. So one day, while she was keeping her sheep in a lonely tract of land, she suddenly felt a wish to dress herself in the robes of splendour. So she washed herself up in a stream, and as she'd always carried a bundle with her, it was easy to shake off the rags and transform herself for a few moments into a great lady. So she's going to put on one of her nice frocks. The king's son, who had lost his way when he was out hunting, they get lost a lot, these kings, don't they? And so perceived this lovely damsel a long way off and wished to look closer at her. But as soon as the girl saw what he was at, she fled into the wood as swiftly as a bird. Now, the prince ran after her, but as he was running, he caught his foot in the root of a tree and fell, and when he got up, she was nowhere to be seen. When she was quite safe, she put her rags back on, she smeared mud on her face and on her hands. However, this young prince, who was both hot and thirsty, found his way to the farm to ask for a drink of cider, and he inquired the name of the beautiful lady that kept the sheep. At this, everyone laughed, for they said that the shepherdess was one of the ugliest and dirtiest creatures under the sun. Now the prince thought some witchcraft must be at work, and he hastened away before the return of the shepherdess, who became that evening the butt of everybody's jests and jokes. But the king's son thought often of the lovely maiden, who he had only seen for a moment, and though she seemed to him much more fascinating than any lady in his court, at last he dreamed of nothing else, and he grew thinner day by day, till his parents inquired what was the matter, promising to do all they could to make him as happy as he once was. He dared not tell them the truth, lest they should laugh at him. So he only said that he should like some bread baked by the kitchen girl in a distant farm. Although the wish appeared rather odd, they hastened to fulfil it, and the farmer was told the request of the king's son. The maiden showed no surprise at receiving such an order, but merely asked for some flour, salt, and water, and also that she might be left alone in a little room adjoining the oven where the kneading trough stood. Before beginning her work, she washed herself carefully and put on her rings. But while she was baking, one of her rings slid into the dough. It's not a good idea to bake bread with rings on. She's made an error there, I think. When she had finished, she dirtied herself again. Oh, I'm glad she'd cleaned herself first before she was baking. And she let lumps of dough stick to her fingers, so that she became as ugly as she was before. Now, the loaf, which was a very little one, was brought to the king's son, who ate it with absolute pleasure. But in cutting it, he found, ta-da, the ring of the princess, and declared to his parents that he would marry the girl. Guess what? Whom the ring fitted on. So the king made a proclamation throughout the whole kingdom, and the ladies came from afar to lay the claim to the honour. But the ring was so tiny that even those who had the smallest hands could only get it onto their little fingers. In a short time, all the maidens of the kingdom, including the peasant girls, had tried on the ring, and the king was just about to announce that their efforts had been in vain when the prince observed that he had not yet seen the shepherdess. They sent to fetch her, and she arrived covered in rags, but with her hands cleaner than usual, so that she could easily slip the ring on. The king's son declared that he would fulfill his promise, and when his parents mildly remarked that the girl was only the keeper of sheep, and a very ugly one too, the maiden boldly said that she had been born a princess, and that if they would only give her some water and leave her alone in a room for a few minutes, she would show them that she could look as well as anyone in her fine clothes. So they did what she asked, and when she entered in a magnificent dress, she looked so beautiful that everybody saw that she must have been a princess in disguise. The king's son recognised the charming damsel, of whom he had once caught a glimpse, and, flinging himself to her feet, asked if she would marry him. The princess then told her story and said that it would be necessary to send an ambassador to her father to ask his consent and to invite him to the wedding. The princess's father, who had never ceased to repent his harshness towards his daughter, had sought her through the land, but as no one could tell him anything of her, he thought she was dead. So remember her dad who said, "Hey, on your bike, about I only like you as much as salt on your bike." He sent her off. Now he'd been looking for her. Oh dear. Therefore, it was with great joy that he heard that she was living, and that the king's son asked for her hand in marriage. And he quitted his kingdom with his eldest daughter so as to be present at the ceremony. By the orders of the bride, they only served her father at the wedding breakfast bread without salt, and meat without seasoning. Seeing him make faces and eat very little, his daughter, who sat beside him, inquired if his dinner was not to his taste. "No," he replied. "The dishes are carefully cooked and sent up, but they are so dreadfully tasteless." "Did I not tell you, my father, that salt was the best thing in life? And yet, when I compared you to salt, to show you how much I loved you, you thought slightly of me, and you chased me from your presence." The king embraced his daughter, gave her a big hug, and allowed that he had been wrong to misinterpret her words. Deary me. Then, for the rest of the wedding feast, they gave him the bread that had salt in and the dishes with seasoning. And he said they were the very best he had ever eaten. There you go. A big misunderstanding. She liked salt that much, it was a compliment. But the king didn't realise it was a compliment. Anyway, I know people who like very bland food. One boy in particular loves bland food. In fact, I'm not a very good cook at all because he doesn't really like any of my cooking. So today's shout out when we're talking about food has to be to Harry. Harry, who loves bland food. I don't even know whether he likes salt, but he certainly doesn't like my cooking. Anyway, see you next time. Bye.